right, so before I get this episode started here, I just wanted to take a quick moment and do a follow-up from my last episode, which was Ep.6 The Holidays and Authentic Identity. And at the end of that episode, I laid out a challenge for myself, and that was to say Merry Christmas to people, just strangers on the street, people I don't really know that well, instead of saying Happy Holidays. And for those of you that haven't heard episode 6 yet, basically the reason that I wanted to do this, to say Merry Christmas instead of Happy Holidays, is it's not to force my opinions or beliefs onto anybody else. It's because I've realized in the past that for me, saying Happy Holidays doesn't really allow me to communicate my joy around the Christmas season, because to me it is the Christmas season. So to say Happy Holidays feels a little inauthentic. And for whatever reason, my true joy just doesn't feel present when I say Happy Holidays to people. So I wanted to say Merry Christmas and use that as an invitation into my joy surrounding the Christmas season. And part of my thought behind this as well was just to pay attention to people's reactions and notice if it's making anybody uncomfortable to hear Merry Christmas, or to pay attention if somebody says that they don't celebrate Christmas when I greet them that way, thinking that that could open up some really interesting opportunities for authentic conversations, where we could discuss our differences and celebrate them. A place that I don't think the greeting of Happy Holidays could get to, because it's just kind of meeting on this amorphous, undefined middle ground. So I did it, I committed to it, and now I'm here to tell you how it went. It was interesting. It was, it generated a lot of discomfort in me, and I was not expecting that as much. I think it had to do with me feeling vulnerable, and, like I was saying, I was wanting to share my joy with people and wanting to share something of myself rather than just exchange pleasantry. Now, something else that I was totally not expecting throughout this whole little experiment was it didn't seem to catch anybody off guard, and it didn't seem to shock anybody. I've created such a stigma around this in my mind that I was expecting people to be kind of like, oh, what? Did he just say Merry Christmas? What do we do with that? I didn't get anything like that though. So that was really interesting. And on the contrary, everybody that I said it to really seemed to appreciate it. And it seemed to spark that same joy in the people I said it to as saying Merry Christmas sparks in me. And so that just made some really special, fun interactions. And I think those positive responses that I received were probably for two reasons. One, I would assume that at least some of those people, the same joy around Merry Christmas, around saying and hearing Merry Christmas, that's present in me, is present in them. I think even more importantly than that, they were definitely responding to the fact that I was more connected and present in the moment, and using those certain words allowed me to be. And I think that's pretty dang important. The other thing that I realized while doing this little experiment is that Merry Christmas is still like everywhere. It's, I just saw and heard Merry Christmas so much more. And I think that's probably just because I destigmatized it for myself. So I started kind of letting it in a little more. But maybe Merry Christmas was just around a lot more this year. Maybe if you're listening, let me know if you saw Merry Christmas more, or if you think that was just me being more aware of it this year. I'm just going to keep saying Merry Christmas in the future and see how it goes. This year it served me very well, and I feel like it served those around me very well too. Who knows? Maybe in the future I'll really offend somebody, or I'll have some really awkward or uncomfortable interaction, and maybe I can record a podcast about that when and if it happens. But this year what I learned is the lesson that I seem to be learning time and time again. And that's that the best way to be is just to be yourself. And deep down, if you're a loving individual that really wants to understand others, the world doesn't need to be protected from anything you would have to say. It's quite on the contrary, in fact. By insulating yourself from the world, playing defense and filtering yourself to the outside world, you deprive it of something life-giving. And that's your humanity. That's your capacity to make mistakes and learn from them. In some ways, you really insulate the world from what you have to offer it. And I think what's more is when you play defense with your words and phrases, you actually end up depriving yourself of very valuable learning experiences. Because just like this example of saying Merry Christmas, I'd never offended anybody by saying Merry Christmas to them, that I know of anyways in the past, but I stopped saying it out of fear that I would offend somebody, which is just totally absurd. So there you have it, my little social experiment around saying Merry Christmas to people, the results, and obviously the requisite little monologue at the end that I just had to do. So let's get on with it. Let's do this New Year's episode. I am super excited to share this stuff with you. Happy New Year and welcome to the Grounded Presence Podcast, a place for exploring authentic identity, deep community, and the process of spiritual evolution. I'm Daniel Powell, and today I have a short and sweet episode for you. Let's talk about 2019 and what I have in store for you here on the Grounded Presence. It's going to be a big year and I have big plans for the show, and I'm super excited to share all of it with you. So without any further ado, here we go with episode 6, the first one of the year. Well, happy 2019 and welcome to a new year. Let's talk about the podcast. Let's talk a little bit about where it's been and let me share a little bit with you about where it's going. I'm super, super excited for 2019. It's going to be a big year. So, if you've listened to the first 6 episodes of the podcast, you know that I started off with this idea of wanting to chase experiences that generate paradigm shifts in myself and share the results in the process and just some thoughts on the whole experience with you. And I started out wanting to do this particularly with having new religious experiences. By that, I just mean experiences with other religions that I'm unfamiliar with. And I just wanted to use this podcast to see how it opened my eyes. So that's what I did in episode 2. I think I called it a Zen encounter with Amy. Me and my wife went and did some Zen meditation together, even though it was a little outside of both of our comfort zones. Well, that's actually the reason, because that's when you get a paradigm shift, is when you do something that's outside your comfort zone and you learn something from it. Now, I was a little bit nervous going into this experience, but I also approached it with a lot of excitement. And I was excited because deep down, I was expecting to find a religion with a bunch of wise ones. A bunch of people who really carry the energy of a true elder. And to me, what that means is somebody who just seems to have this transcendent wisdom about them. One that I can't fully understand, but something that I can feel in my gut and know that it's good and true. And I've encountered these people before, so I was just expecting to find a room full of them and a religion full of them. So I think in episode 2, I read a Zen parable, one that I picked up from Richard Rohr's book, Everything Belongs. And I'll read the parable for you here. So the parable is an interaction that takes place between a Zen master and his student. So the student says to the Zen master, "Is there anything that I can do to make myself enlightened?" The Zen master replies, "As little as you can do to make the sun rise in the morning." And then the student says, "Then of what use are these spiritual exercises you prescribe?" And the master replies, "To make sure you are not asleep when the sun begins to rise." So that's what I went into this thing expecting, was wisdom and knowledge that's almost otherworldly and transcendent of the human condition, but at the same time being so deeply bathed in the human condition. And instead, what I got out of the Zen experience was a very human one. This is the way I described it in episode 2. So, what I got out of the experience was just watching the processes of how everything else takes place and picking up on little things here and there and watching people. Mm-hmm. The lady that sat up front, who was like the highest rank in the room, I don't know what you would really refer to her as, but she was definitely like the lead teacher in the room.
Yeah, she was.
So there was a little talk after the meditation finished. It lasted 15, 20, 25 minutes.
Yeah. She answered some questions. Yeah,
at the end there. But it was funny because the room was kind of warm and she just looked like haggard and sweaty. And it's like, when you think of a Buddhist meditating on their little cushion, you don't think of like a haggard and sweaty, tired looking woman.
No.
You think of this serene, like everything's in the perfect place and all that. But yeah, she just seemed tired and kind of like, I don't know. I'm here, but I'm not sure if I want to be. So. That experience was a fun one because I was expecting something completely different than the religion I was raised in, which it was, but it was also something completely different than what I was expecting it to be, which made it all the more fun. And I had never thought of Zen Buddhism being an institutional religion, but it's still an institution. And that became very apparent through the experience. And it was just a good reminder that every institution and every person, no matter what, is still subject to the human condition. And no one is 100% enlightened or fully evolved, at least not in the ways I define the terms these days. So that was a fun experience, and it was a really good reminder. But it wasn't something that I felt the need to replicate across multiple religions as I had originally intended. It's like I was seeking the religion of harmony and human perfection, but I was quickly reminded that neither one of those actually exists in reality in any pure form. So after that, I just decided that having multiple different religious experiences wasn't really a viable avenue to pursue on this podcast. And after that, I decided to start having deep conversations with other people and recording them. Just the kind of conversations that we never tend to have with each other, but I think we all really want to. You heard the one with Dave Johnson on episodes 3 and 4. And what I've found in life is that any conversation I have that I consider to be a good one always challenges some paradigm of mine or brings a preconceived notion that I've held into question. Now, in my life, sometimes these types of conversations are face-to-face with friends, and sometimes they take place in the form of listening to a podcast or reading a book, a conversation I'm having with a media source in a sense. And these are the internal and external conversations that I want to generate for you, my awesome listeners, here on this podcast. I want to generate conversations that might cause you to rethink notions you've held and perceptions you've conceived, maybe even ones you've developed without much thought. And my aim here isn't to bring you into some sort of thinking that I deem to be the correct way of thinking or something like that. There are plenty of podcasts and other media resources and conversations that try to do that. And you know what? I think we're all just sick of it. Just sick of a seat at the table requiring you to adopt a certain way of thinking or a certain set of beliefs. Now, my intent here is to showcase a wide variety of thoughts and opinions. And I'll just play my hand for you here. My hope is to find the common ground of our human experience across all sorts of boundaries and just all sorts of barriers. We all have a different set of experiences and a different set of values and beliefs. We all have different points of view. And Richard Rohr says something along the lines of, a point of view is just that, a view from a point. There's some deep intrinsic truth in those words. So that's the second time I've mentioned Richard Rohr in this podcast. And you might want to get used to that because I consider this dude to be a mentor and spiritual father to me. Now, I've never met the man directly, but his books and his talks have influenced my thinking more than anyone else. So if you're a Richard Rohr fan, stick with me and we'll get along just fine. So there you have it, really. My hand is played, my cards are on the table. There's no mystery or veiled purpose to what I'm trying to do here on this show. I just want to invite you into the wonder of the human experience. And I want to invite you to try on and consider new views from new positions and see how they sit with you. Now, all that said, another thing I'm going to be trying to do through this podcast is to bring you along on journeys with me. I have in the works right now some series, maybe even some full seasons, where I'll be exploring topics and ideas, ones that make me a bit uncomfortable due to the polarizing or taboo nature of the way we typically discuss them publicly. But I want to dive in with a spirit of curiosity and wonder, always searching for the common thread of our shared humanity. Joseph Campbell said, "I don't believe people are looking for the meaning of life as much as they are looking for the experience of being alive." And I think that's it right there. We're looking for the experience of being alive. I hope to expose the intrinsic value of everyone's search for that experience through my work here. So over the next little bit, this show is going to take a few different forms. Sometimes it'll be me and a friend having a conversation over some aspect of the human experience. Other times it's going to be me interviewing somebody who has a very unique experience or point of view that I think that the world needs to hear. And sometimes it's going to be just a solo podcast with me sharing some thoughts and insights that I've gleaned from my life and experiences recently. And sometimes the show will be a more produced show or a series exploring specific topics and ideas, potentially over a number of episodes. And these are the ones that I'm really excited about because I got some fun ideas. But they're also going to be the ones that take a lot more time and effort to put out, but it'll be worth it. And I am truly excited when I get to release those to you. So moving forward in 2019, come on a journey with me. A journey into the unknown, a journey into what makes us all truly human, a journey toward deeper love, better understanding, and a more vibrant compassion for others and the world in which we live. So 2019, it's gonna be a good year. Join me on the journey and bring your authentic self, bring your desire for deep community, and bring the confusion and upheaval that going through a spiritual evolution generates in your life. Just bring yourself and what makes you you. And join me on this crazy ride this year. It's gonna be a good one. There we go. The first episode of 2019 in the bag. Now, I really hope you're enjoying this show. And if you are, there's two really big compliments you can give me. One is sharing an episode with your friends on social media. And two is writing me a review on iTunes. I'd really love to reach more people with this spirit of wonder, excitement, and curiosity over our shared humanity. And I'd love your help doing that. Furthermore, make sure to find me on all the social media outlets, on Facebook and Instagram at The Grounded Presence, on Twitter at The Grounded Pod, or feel free to connect with me by sending an email to thegroundedpresence@gmail.com. I'd love to hear from you, what you're thinking about the show, and I'd also love to hear any relevant stories or experiences that you have that you'd like to share with me. So I will see you next time, but until then, stay curious, keep searching for true community, and keep asking those important questions that are bubbling up inside you.